While I look back on my childhood, I remember it with such a fierce fondness. White picket fence and a tire swing out front. My dad had a close friend whose son was born less than 5 months after me. He was called Bruno. My mom and his mom would joke that it's our destiny that we'd wed. My favorite memories were when Dad and I had just been fishing. We didn't catch anything, but my dad would always say, "That's not the point of fishing. We keep the moon man company." And on the way home, we'd pick up strawberry milkshakes. I'd fondly gaze up at the moon man, who to me was the most beautiful man my young eyes had ever seen. The thing that stood out to me the most about the moon man were his eyes. One a deep silver and the other dark honey color. Gold became my favorite color shortly after meeting the moon man, and I never went a day without wearing some form of gold and silver, even to this day. I remember as we drove to visit family, a long drive, Dad would tell me about the moon man and how he'd always protect me when Dad wasn't able to. I remember thinking the moon man was a hero. At night, Dad would tell me stories of the moon and the sun, all the adventures they'd go on, and how brave one would have to be to hold hands with the moon man and face battles together. Dad always said I'd be the one to fight alongside the moon man. Bruno the brute and Sophia the sheep. We were called by our peers. My dad always told me that Bruno needed me, otherwise he'd be lonely. Bruno's parents weren't around often, so eventually he became a staple in my life. I remember at 7, I was so envious that it hurt. I cried to the moon man at times, who looked at me and comforted me with words that I can only describe as honey. The moon man remained as beautiful as ever. Words remained as comforting as ever, even as I sobbed to him about how we were moving and how I hated my dad for tearing my family apart, for leaving my mom for Bruno's mom. I still recall how my mom looked at him when the affair had come to light, and how she flinched away from me when I went to cuddle her. She didn't speak to me, but that night I cried to the moon man about how she didn't love me. He didn't disagree with me, but instead offered a warm embrace that my mom wouldn't anymore. Mom gave Dad full custody, and the moon man whispered softly that she was just hurt and she'd come around eventually. But she didn't, and I know the moon man wasn't telling me the truth. But he had a way with words that made me believe what he said was true, even when the facts stared at me coldly in the face. I would scream to him about what Bruno had done wrong that day, and he'd hold me softly, something my father no longer did. He'd whisper stories of his fights and braid my hair, something that neither my mom or Bruno's mom would do. I felt such a fierce love for the moon man. The moon man had always saved me. Even when I burnt myself, he was there to comfort me. And when I thought there was a monster hiding under the bed, he was there. That night, the moon man promised to follow me. I wished he didn't. As time went along, his touches became more possessive, words more jealous, but his words remained as soft as ever. I remember the night I told him I was leaving, and his beautiful form changed to something no human should ever see. I could barely glance at the inhuman shape. It bubbled and overflowed in a silver mess, and just looking at him burnt like staring directly at the sun. He laid off when I met my husband, but I could feel his gaze following me as I drove. feel his hot breath. I remember when he spoke of his battles for me. When I was a child, his breath smelt of honey and candy. Now, it smelt sour, bitter, letting me know of his feelings. I could feel his wrath and neediness as my own. That's why I'm recording this. My daughter, Sylvia, had told me about the Moon Man, unknowing that just his name sent terrors down my spine. She smiled fondly of the handsome man who'd promised to protect her, claiming he was the bravest and most beautiful man she'd ever seen. I hope my husband can forgive me for my actions, as there is only one way to escape the Moon Man. My daughter stared up at me, eyes filled with amazement, while she told me stories of the Moon Man. I can't help but think how she has her father's eyes. I can't let him lay hands on our daughter. So when your child talks about the man dancing alongside the car, don't whisper honeyed secrets of the brave Moon Man. Make them avert their gaze, because once the Moon Man claims you, there's only one way to escape.